choosing the right kayak for the big and tall. Hey guys, welcome to this episode. Today, JT and I are going to be talking about something that comes up quite a bit on both the forum and really kind of all over the place is, if you are a big and tall, if you are a heavier guy or, a 6'3" plus guy, how do you choose the right kayak that's going to fit you? JT, welcome to the other side, brother.
Appreciate it. I'm ready to kind of chip in too, especially as being the guy who is behind a lot of the comments on the YouTube videos that we do for Eco Fishing Shop and some of ours, and even some of the Instagram comments. We get a lot of, funny comments that are made in jest, and also some rather angry ones sometimes about how, they'll never fit a bigger guy or a taller guy. And honestly, that's just not true. So
what are you thinking?
I'm thinking I don't know if I could get my fat ass in and out of one of those.
Me? Yeah, you. Anybody.
My big ain't getting in that kayak.
No way I would ever step foot in one of those kind of things, but
Me.
you can get
me.
yeah.
I go, my fat ain't getting in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get guys that come into the shop and we understand budget for sure, but we get guys that are like, this is the kayak I'm going to get. And we almost know it's not going to perform. So that's why we're doing this. JT kind of brought this to the table off of a lot of questions that he was getting. And we want to, like we say, be a resource and try to help guys make a little bit more educated decision on what we see on a daily basis fitting for guys of all sizes.
yeah, we can just jump right into it. We'll kind of go over some of our picks as kayaks that can handle more weight and height. And obviously there's no one size fits all for these. There's quite a few of them, but we'll just kind of go over a range of budget and places to start for some people.
Yeah. And what I will put one quick thing in, JT, that we tell people all the time, whether it's at Eco Fishing Shop or your local shop, find a place to do a demo. If you can demo a kayak, that's always the best way to see if it's going to perform for you. I know we do a lot of them. We're doing them today. I wanted to talk real quick about capacities. Definitely do your research on capacities. You need to figure out what that capacity is. Is that a capacity? And unfortunately, there's no governing body on that. So you need to look at look at that and then figure out, what kind of gear do you haul? Do you haul a large cooler full of ice and water and that kind of stuff? So you need to be well under your capacities. Now, that being said, also, when you overfill it, that doesn't mean that kayak's going to sink, but you will end up having problems with water coming up through your scuppers and the boat just not performing. So although I understand budget, you just don't want a kayak that's not going to perform. So keep an eye on those capacities and make sure you're well underneath it, so that boat will do everything you want it to do.
When I had done some research when I was going to do my own too, and don't pitchfork me in the comments if this is not correct, but isn't it like a 70% rule kind of? If you took that 450-pound capacity times it by 70%, that's kind of your usable weight, or
Correct.
At least to stay within a range, kind of to avoid some of the issues you were talking about.
Correct. And can you put a little more in there? You can, but that is what keeps you very safe. And like I said, it's not always about it being unsafe. It's just that kayak performing the way it is intended to perform.
Do you mind as a quick aside, talking about length? Does length always mean more deck space, or is length typically a little bit more for the bow and stern storage behind where your seat would be?
Yeah. So it's going to be model to model. I mean, a lot of them will have a little bit of extension and then put a hatch in there, which doesn't give you a lot of usable deck space, but it gives you more storage. But I will say, and I've said this quite a few times before, you do not get stability out of a longer kayak. What helps with the longer kayak is being able to take waves. You're going to get a lot more of the up and down because it's going to cut water a little bit better. But on most instances, I know like on the Sportsman line, the 106 and the 136 are very similar when you're standing in that kayak. But when you take it into big water, especially that's got some waves in that, the 136 is going to perform quite a bit better because it's going to cut water better. So yeah, I think on length, you're willing to look at each one. I know when you go to a 106 or even on the big fish or really any line, you're going to get a little bit more deck space and a little bit more storage space, which I think would be more apt for your taller guys. You know, you get a guy that's 6'6", he's going to want a little bit more leg room and a little bit more room to stretch out in that boat. So that's where your length is gonna really come into play. For your larger guys, I really don't think length is quite as important. I've got a guy that's a pro staffer that's a big guy, and he was in a 120 autopilot for several years and absolutely loved it. And so the 136, what he gets out of that, if he was to move up to the 136, which he actually did, was he's able to carry more stuff with him, and your capacities are going to be a little bit bigger because the more you disperse that water, the more capacity you're going to be able to get out of that boat. To jump into it, probably the first more budget friendly line that we have, I think, is the Big Fish from Three Waters. That kayak, it tends to be a little heavier, but that actually helps with stability. And it's a wider kayak. So that is one that, and when we talk about these guys, we're going to talk about the whole line, not one specific model. So the Big Fish 108 is the pedal drive version. Then you got then you also have just the paddle onlys in case you get a guy that's a river guy. Have you seen much on that kayak, JT?
This one's a pretty popular one just because of the price too. It's a relatively affordable pedal kayak, and then I've got the specs pulled up for you. It's 11 feet long, and then 38 inches wide, and it's got a 450-pound capacity too, so pretty high capacity. And again, it has, and you were talking about before we jumped on to one important thing, can be a swivel seat. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's available for this one now too.
Yeah, especially for the bigger guys. I think I've had a customer in here that was a larger guy, quite a bit larger. And the swivel seat really was a big thing when we went and demoed kayaks, because he could actually swivel that seat and then just sit in the seat and then twist into the kayak. So it really was helpful to him. But then also as a bigger guy, and I was a bigger guy, been working on that. But one problem was reaching behind you to get stuff out of your pack or out of your cooler. So the swivel seat does help with accessibility a lot. So we will definitely, when we're talking about the lines we're going to talk about, we'll tell you which ones have a swivel seat available. But the Big Fish, they did just come out with a swivel seat option. So that really helps. It also has a locking mechanism, so you can lock that seat so that, it's manageable. But the 108 is a heavier kayak, but it's a tank. It's got a nice wide seat, so you're not uncomfortable. But it's just a super friendly kayak to a larger angler.
Yeah, it's funny you used the exact word I was going to. It's a tank.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that one can be a little bit harder to move around. You would need a cart probably. I think it's 135 pounds is the weight of the kayak without the seat and the drive.
Right.
So fully rigged, that's going to be a heavy kayak to move. But with that, it's probably one of the more stable kayaks because of its weight.
Yeah, the Wilderness Recon. That is that's kind of a boat that hasn't been moving quite as good as the others, but I think that one, for a larger guy, the width on that boat is what's impressive, and adds to the stability. Also has a swivel seat available now.
Yeah, so that one is 12 feet 2 inches and then 38 inches wide and has a capacity of 450 as well.
Yeah. And I tell you what, JT, a lot of guys think that, if they're a bigger guy, they got to have that 13, 14-foot boat. And that the 13-foot and 14-foot boats automatically kind of push you into the trailer game, and we're trying to show you too that you can get the 10.5, 12-foot boats that you can still haul in the back of your truck. And even if you're a bigger guy, these kayaks will still work for you. Still have the, a bigger seat, a little bit wider, a little bit more access for your larger guys.
This one looks like the seat is pretty elevated too
It is.
compared
It
to the
is.
other one.
Yeah, the wilderness, definitely the seat has come a long way, and that swivel seat, like I said, I actually think the swivel seat is kind of the next thing that most kayak companies are going to try and figure out. NuCanoe's done it for years, and it's huge. So I think, as we move forward, several of our companies are starting to slowly bring swivel seats in.
I mean, I'm not a big guy or a tall guy. I'm right in the middle, a perfect American average for height and weight. And I will admit, like I was fishing last year out of the NuCanoe Frontier, and it had a swivel seat, and it's a game changer, regardless of what size you are.
For sure. I'm an old town guy. I run an autopilot 120, and trust me, I've talked to Danny Johnson, which does the Sasquatch for us, because he's very good at R&D, about trying to figure out how to develop me something to put a swivel seat on my old town. Because after using one, and just even as small as being able just to turn your seat a little bit to reach back, it it is a game changer. I really like that, and I think it's even more important when you're a bigger guy to be able to do that and not have to turn and adjust your seat. A lot of times when you really get to turning, you're putting pressure on that hole in a corner. That's where you can end up having some problems with cracking and things like that, because you're squirming around trying to figure out how to get back there, and it's just not always conducive.
Yeah. So one thing we always talk about too is what kind of water do you think you'll primarily fish on? Because there is a difference in the hull shapes. What would you say this Wilderness Recon? And I pulled up the HD, so with the pedal drive.
Yeah.
What kind of water do you think this would be good for if people were looking?
So, I think it's a good crossover boat. I think it's
Okay.
kind of like like the Crescent Shoaly. I think it's kind of the type of boat that, you know, it's small enough, it would still be a decent puddle jumper and great river boat. And you can go the non-PDL. I always say non-PDLs are better in Missouri rivers because we have a lot of skinny water. So that boat would be good there. The width on that boat makes it really easy to not draft in really deep water. So um, it and the Shoaly are very similar in that. But I think this also it could be used as a big water boat as well. I think it's got the ability and it cuts water really well.
We'll just keep it moving. We'll go to
Yeah, yeah.
the Jackson Big Rig.
So the Jackson Big Rig, that one's kind of near and dear to my heart. That, in my opinion, that's one of the best big water boats that Jackson made for sure. They got rid of that when the NAR came out, and then through popular demand, I believe it came back last year, and we had the launch party for it. The Jackson Big Rig is big. I mean, it's a monster, but that kayak is got huge deck space. And give us some specs on that one, JT.
Yeah, so that one's 13 feet 3 inches, 40 inches wide, and then the capacity shoots up from the last couple to 550 pounds.
Yeah, and that one's really made for big water. When we start talking about water again, can that go to the river? It can, but it is a big water, destroyer. It does really well in big water. You get plenty of deck space, great rod storage and rod management. They do not have a swivel seat for that. But like I said, a lot of kayak companies are working on that. But I think that is one of those, and these next couple of boats we'll talk about are the ones that are no question. I don't know of anybody that's too big for that boat.
And again, it's kind of got an elevated seat too. So if you're someone who wants to stand, that makes a huge difference, regardless of height, weight, and like even joint mobility. Standing up on a kayak, if it's a lower seat, is pretty tricky and you can feel really uneasy. So when that seat is elevated like this one is, it's much, much easier to stand and fish if that's important to you.
Yeah, and just to be able to bend your knees, that's why the sit-on tops have grown so fast compared to the sit-ins. The sit-ins, your legs are straight out. Well, the bigger you are, the tougher that is to just sit, flat and keep your legs straight out. Even if it's just the ability to just pull your legs up to you a little bit and bend your knees, it makes a big difference. And that big rig is very stable. Nothing against the NAR, but I think if you're a big guy, the big rig in the Jackson line, 100% is the way to go. It's a great kayak, and the anglers are who made them bring that kayak back, because it was so popular, especially for the bigger guys. And I know a guy that fishes with one of those. Even when the NAR came out, he got the NAR and he went back to the big rig, because it's just I don't want to say it was made for a bigger guy, but it'll handle just about anything. It's a great kayak, and it's still a great hull and hull design that cuts water really well and will adapt to motors and anything that you want to put on it, and still be able to handle whatever you put on it, as well as your weight.
And I pulled up the pedal drive of that one too. Is that one a pedal only?
That
Or-
one is a pedal
okay.
only. I will say, if you're a river guy, especially in Missouri, the Jackson pedal drive is probably the best pedal drive for rivers, because their pedal drive goes all the way up into the hull. So you're not ever dragging the prop. You're not having to lift it in and out. Jackson is a very solid river kayak company. That kayak could do both. It could go big water. You can go rivers. Super shallow rivers, I don't think I would take it out, but there isn't any big water that I wouldn't put that kayak on.
The next one we got was the Old Town ePDL.
So the ePDL is new. That kayak is in the big water / predator frame or hull. That is an amazing hull design. It's very fast. The ePDL really stepped it up and did some cool things with that. And what are the specs on that one, JT?
So it's 13 feet 2 inches, not quite as wide at 36 inches, and then has the boat capacity of 500 pounds. But this one kind of gives you that usable boat capacity that we were talking about, and that's at 357. That kind of that 70% of your safe range to keep the function the way you want it. So that's kind of nice that it just gives it to you.
Right. And with the ePDL, that is giving you that range with the battery and everything already there.
Yep.
Because it's part of the boat. So when you start looking at the non-pedal drive or the pedal drive version, all three of those, the non-pedal in the big water, the pedal big water, or the ePDL, all the same hull, I think that can cover just about every base you're looking for. Also, that's a really good kayak for really tall guys, because it is a 13.2 and has really great adjustability when it comes to the seat, the sliding back and forth, and a lot of storage on that boat as well.
You brought up a good point, and I meant to bring that up earlier. Pay attention to the sliding seat, especially for pedal drives, because if you can't move back or forward, if you're shorter or taller, you got to really dial in for those pedal drives, especially prop drives. So that is one thing to consider if you are someone who is over 6 feet 2 inches. You might want a seat that can move back a little bit so you can dial in your pedal stroke.
Yeah, for sure. And close doesn't work on that a lot, so you need to really get in the boat, whether that's just sitting in it at the shop or taking it on a demo. Because as you probably know, JT, if your stroke is not right, it's going to end up, you're going to have, your knees are going to get sore, your quads are going to get sore, tailbone's going to get sore. So making sure that the adjustability is there. Old Town does not do a swivel seat, so that's something hopefully that they'll work on. But that one, and really, JT, I wanted to also talk about the Sportsman line.
Yep.
While we're on the Old Town thing. The autopilots and really the Sportsman hull design, the 106, 120, those are very good for larger guys too. I know a guy who's a bigger guy who's been in a 120 I talked about a little bit earlier. That's also a really good, the stability on that is really good. And I think they will handle just about anything you want to put at them too. Now, the width of that kayak is not as much as like some of the ones we've talked about and are going to talk about. But I know capacity-wise that boat still performs really well with a larger guy. And like their sliding seat, you just pull a couple pins and slide it forward and backwards. Very easy to do on the fly. We've got guys that kayak makes it easy that if you're on the water, and say you want to slide your seat back just so you have a little more deck space and you want to stand up, you can easily do that on the water and then sit down, pull your pins, and slide it back to start pedaling. Some of the kayaks that you have to actually lift the seat and move it, and that's a little tough when you're on the water, especially if you're a bigger guy. So the Old Town is very efficient in the way that they've engineered that kayak.
Then let's jump to the NuCanoe Unlimited.
So the NuCanoe Unlimited, in my opinion, is probably one of the absolute best for a larger angler. That kayak is actually made where you can actually put another seat in it and turn it into a tandem, which we do quite often here. And run down those specs real quick for the folks, JT.
Yep, 12 feet 6 inches, 41 inches wide, and then the weight capacity of 600.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, with that swivel seat, I've put very large guys that said, hey, yeah, I wish I could kayak, but there's just no way, I'm too big. I'm like, you just haven't found the right kayak. So we've done a demo with an Unlimited. You push it to the edge of the water, get it in the water just a little bit, swivel that seat around where you can just sit down into it, swivel your feet into the kayak, push off, and you're out. Probably one of the most stable platforms as far as that goes as well. I've got a guy who has that. He's a very large guy. His grandkids will be climbing in and out off the sides of it, jumping off into the water, and it handles that. I personally feel like if you have any concerns at all, that boat right there is the one that every single time they're happy, because that boat, it's also completely upgradable. NuCanoe is awesome about having all kinds of add-ons, whether that is their pedal drive or motors, foot steering for the motors. They have a great pod because it's a very open format. So if anybody has a dog or anything like that, you don't have to have all that stuff. Plenty of deck space. And like I said, that capacity is absolutely amazing.
I usually explain this one as a blank canvas to people asking about them. It looks really bare bones compared to some of the other ones, because some of the other ones have integrated rod holders and storage, but the NuCanoes are really cool because they have accessory track everywhere, and it is just completely ready for you to build it. So if you're someone who has an image of how you want to build your kayak and you want something stable, NuCanoe is great because it's just legitimately a blank canvas. You can paint it however you want, whether that's fishing. I know there are people who hunt out of them, do duck hunting, and have added blinds to them, and you can do some really cool stuff with it.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, we carry fishing kayaks only and NuCanoes, because NuCanoe is really a sportsman's kayak. Like you said, they have a shotgun mount for their kayaks. They have I've got a guy actually in Minnesota who uses one to go get on the river, to go all the way to the back of the deepest part of some government land where he can jump out, deer hunt, drag the deer out, throw it in the kayak, and then on down the river he goes. But he could never walk that far into the woods to get where he really wanted to go. So the duck hunting side of it, it's just a really cool platform. It also has a transom, so you could put a tiller handle motor on that. We put Newports on them all the time. I'm sure JT will throw some pictures up here of some different builds that we've done, so you can kind of see. JT, you're spot on. It's just a blank canvas, but the nice thing about that is if you want to throw that thing on the river, perfect boat for it. You want to, throw it on a pond, perfect for that. If you want to take it to the ocean, or you want to take it to big water, it will handle all of that, and you can upgrade it as much as you want to upgrade it, or keep it as bare bones as you want. But the capacity of that boat gives you the ability to really do some crazy stuff with that kayak.
And it's a good starting price point. I mean, obviously you kind of have to always factor in your budget should be more than just a kayak. It should always include what you want for accessories. So just plan for more. But really, I mean, the NuCanoe is at such a good starting price at under 2,000 that it's a really good entry kayak.
And I know a lot of times the length is very important when you're talking about everything you're doing out of the water. Putting it in your truck, hauling it, storing it, doing things like that. There's some guys that have some restrictions that they need a shorter kayak, but if you need you need a smaller kayak that's easier to do those things with, and you're a bigger guy, what's going to work? Well, you don't have to get a 14-foot kayak. The Unlimited's 12'6". That's pretty average. And to have the features that thing has and the upgradability, I personally think for a bigger guy, that's probably the first kayak I would look at, because it's a no-brainer as far as the capacities. It's going to be hard to get close to it.
I think we had kind of talked about 5, but I might throw one more bonus one in here. The Hobie Pro Angler, the 12 or the 14.
Yeah, great kayak, super wide. As far as the deck space, a lot of these, even on a wider kayak, they have the sides of the kayak are fairly thick. This one, the Pro Angler, is not so much. Jonathan's been in one for a couple of years. Jonathan also used to be a big guy, and now he's busting his tail too, and is heading the other direction, which is awesome. But that kayak is a great seat, great adjustability. Everything is within hand's reach to be able to do the things you need to do with that kayak, whether it be to drop the skeg or drop your transducer. It has all of those things to be able to do that well within reach. Hobie also has the adjustability when it comes to the pedals is on the pedals, so your seat stays in its spot, but you can adjust the leg distance on the pedals. So that makes it easier for your taller guys.
Yeah. I thought this was a good one to pull up too. And Jonathan's kayak, I call the mothership, because the way he's built that out is just such an extreme level of kayak builds.
Oh yeah.
I'll throw some video up for you over this talk so everyone can see his spaceship and show you. I mean, it's really capable. Like what they're capable of is just crazy these days. And obviously he's probably the extreme example, but it's a big kayak. It's wide. I would say when I got to sit in his and stand up in it, I mean, that thing didn't rock at all. It's crazy stable. I threw it up just as an example of something different. It has the fin drives. Hobie's really perfected those. You mentioned that the adjustability is in those. That's just as easy as clicking a button and moving the pedals closer to you or farther away from you. And, that's a push-pull motion rather than a revolution, which is really nice. And it's crazy how efficient them fins are. They push that big kayak through the water and that thing turns on a dime. So just a cool platform.
Yeah, the engineering on that kayak is great. And I would say, if you're talking bodies of water, I know Christine Fisher puts hers on the river. Our rivers here are very skinny. I know I've said that, but I think a fin drive is also, the fin drives with Hobie are decent on the river. They're pretty good because you can flutter it. You can bring your fins up under the boat. That boat's going to do well in most all bodies of water. The 12-foot and the 14, heavy boats. But if you're a larger guy, both big or tall, that one right there is going to handle you as well.
The factors we've talked about are length can play a little bit of factor, but doesn't always add stability. It's more just comfort if you're a taller person. It's really the width, and the swivel seats can help, but really it comes down to the width and kind of that weight capacity.
The capacity.
Yep.
Yeah, making sure that it's going to handle not only you. We get that a lot. Not only you, but you got to think about your gear. If you're a guy who takes a small tackle bag and 4 or 5 rods, you don't have much in gear. But if you're a guy who likes to take, his entire tackle box, a bunch of rods, you're adding, and then you got to look at it when you start adding motors and batteries and, all of that is part of it. And as long as you're keeping up on that and we can help with any of that, just give us a call, either at the shop or hit us up on the forum. We can help kind of figure out some of that stuff for you, but just know that all that plays a part.
Yeah. I do want to throw one quick question at you that we got to wrap this all up. So this one isn't necessarily, it kind of goes in lockstep with what we talked about as far as weight capacities, but this one's more, or the river, I mean. This one is a question that said, I'm interested in getting into kayak fishing and have a budget of $3,000. I would like to get a pedal kayak. Primarily we'll be fishing rivers with slow to medium currents, and they want to be able to float down a few miles and have the mobility needed to pedal back.
Yeah, I'll give you 3 quick ones. The 3 quick ones I would tell you is the Jackson Bite with the flex drive. Great river kayak, and that flex drive is absolutely great, especially if you're going to be floating back because you can just raise it up in the hole. One of the best river kayaks ever made. I own one myself. The Recon 120, actually a great pedal drive, super easy, especially for a bigger guy or just really anybody. That the Recon would be a great kayak for that kind of fishing. And lastly, I would say the 106 or the 120 PDL Sportsman. Those are absolutely great as well. And those are all sub $3,000.
Another good resource to wrap this all up too is just head to our forum at the Kayak Anglers Resource.com. We're starting to get a lot more action on there too, and people are really starting to dive into some pretty deep topics, whether that's building out trailers, like how to store them in your garage, how to rig them out, the best kayaks for river fishing or big open water fishing. Like we've got topics in there, and then, it's valuable. It's not coming from us that work from the shop. It's just coming from other anglers like yourself asking the same question. So hop on there, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll keep pumping these out for you guys.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. And like JT said, it's not just for asking questions. It's also for you guys to get on there and answer some and help your fellow anglers. So we appreciate it, and appreciate you watching this episode.